call me the marketing person because I was a teacher. I grew up in a family of 13 children, and we were singers, and we did all of these things. So I am quite used to being out in the public eye. A lot of writers aren't, but I think it's kind of it's a bonus that has helped me. And I love the writing, but you know what? I love the interaction with people. You know, it's just so much fun. You learn so much. I think my generation particularly, we were always taught, particularly as women, to put ourselves last. And I was an English teacher, so I always say, you know, we were taught to say, John, Mary, and I. And the grammar is to put yourself last. And I'm afraid that that idea carries over, and certainly did, and I think still does. We think less of ourselves. And I think we need to, it's taken me a lifetime to realize the power that I have to do things if I just do them. Even though I think that life for women has improved considerably, I think that some of those things that look like they've improved, they look that way on the surface, but if you dig down, women are still struggling. And you look at some of the stats of, you know, people in power and that sort of thing, and some of the hidden agenda that people have to make sure that women or, you know, indigenous groups or whatever, that they don't have the opportunity to be the best they can be. I think we've just kind of made that a little bit underground. There's still a lot of people who still hold those views, and I don't know what the solution for that is. I think we just keep going the way we are, but really. When I was 46, I had a series of strokes one weekend, and I lost my short-term memory, and oh boy, here I am telling you my heart story, right? But I thought I was going to die. I wouldn't go shopping and buy anything because I figured it was a waste of money because I was going to die. And it was, you know, it was the love of my wonderful husband and my family and so on. And now, I mean, look what I have done since then. So whenever I hear of anybody who's had a similar shock to their system, I always say to them, and I tell them my story, and I say, you know, you think it's over now, and you can't hardly climb, you can hardly climb out of the hole. But here's my story, and here's what happened to me, and you definitely can. I always recognize that in people that I meet, and eventually, you know, we all start finding out more about each other, and I recognize in those people who have had bad things happen to them, and then they have chosen to go on. And I am going to make sure I don't give up on anything, and that I push myself to do. And the next year I was writing my book, my first book, and now I've got my fourth book coming out, you know. So another bad thing that happened, but it's what we choose to do with it, isn't it? It interests me that ordinary people can rise to the occasion when extraordinary circumstances demand it. We don't know we have it in us, but we do. And you know, I didn't really think of it, but your life has all these stepping stones, and you don't really realize that you're going up a continuous stairway until you get to this stage in your life, and you look back and you go, I didn't actually recognize that sign there. But so, yeah, I'm pretty lucky. I think it's interesting as I look back over my life so far, that I was always a pretty successful person, and I was a teacher. It feels funny to say this, but I think I was well respected and loved as a teacher. But you know what? When I retired and began to explore the creative side of my nature, because you have to realize I went to school in a system that was, thou shalt stay in the box. And when I started to explore my creative side, and when I started to write on a serious, in a serious manner, I just felt that I was doing what I was meant to do. It just is the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I was 60 when I started to write. Seriously. Ron Calhoun was the guy he was the top guy in Canada, the Cancer Society, that was, calling the shots and so on. It's an amazing story. I'm so privileged to write it. My mom was, I always called her Valerie Volunteer. Her name wasn't Valerie, but she had 13 children, and she never held down a job until she was in her 60s. But the woman was always one of those volunteers. You know, that age, that generation, they gave so much of themselves, and that was my mother. And she met Ron Calhoun in the Cancer Society. They were both working in it, and that's how I got to meet him. And so that would probably be about 40 years ago. So I have known him all of these years. I know I look 25, but what the heck. So that's how I got to meet him. And then back and forth. My mother ran provincially for an election, and she didn't win, but Ron Calhoun was the person in charge of her running. 3 years later, he ran federally, and my husband Ron was in charge of that. And then fast forward quite a few years until our son was, 25 or 30 or something, like maybe 25. And Ron Calhoun was looking for somebody because he was involved in a certain project. A long story short, my son got into that, and he became the executive director of the group called Partners in Research. And our families have just been like this. So about 3 years ago, Ron asked me to write this book. And I was up to my ears in my third book of the trilogy at that point, and I said, I just can't do it. But you know what? The next year, he asked me again, and I said, let me think about it. And I came home, and then a week later, I called him and I said, Calhoun, you're on. And so, I mean, I write historical fiction as a matter of, that's my first love. And this one is narrative nonfiction. And I couldn't make things up because, I mean, he doesn't want me to tell lies, Joyce, right now, my husband and I, are our two grandchildren, and one is Beth's daughter, and she's 11, and one is our son Kevin's son, and he is 10. And to see these bright little minds and to be able to sit and interact with them and so on, I have to say, having grandchildren is really just a gift. It's absolutely a gift.